Syria's ally Russia has deployed thousands of troops and military hardware in Syria. In a statement, President Vladimir Putin said Russia, in the most serious manner, condemns the attack. The airstrikes began around 4 a.m. Saturday morning, lighting up the night sky above Damascus as explosions echoed across the city. Syria claimed it shot down 13 missiles. The office of Syria's president posted this video to social media Saturday, purporting to show Bashar al-Assad arriving at his office, captioned with the words, "Good morning, steadfastness." Hundreds of his supporters gathered in Damascus to protest the strikes. Syria's ally Russia has deployed thousands of troops and military hardware in Syria. In a statement, President Vladimir Putin said Russia, in the most serious manner, condemns the attack. A senior general said Moscow could supply Syria with more advanced missile systems.
We consider that this airstrike isn't a response to an imaginary chemical attack, but a reaction to the success of the Syrian armed forces in their battle to free their territory from international terrorism.
The United States, France, and Britain said the strikes were directly linked to Syria's alleged use of chemical weapons last week on the Damascus suburb of Douma that killed at least 40 people. International inspectors were due to arrive at the site Saturday. British fighter jets were seen returning to base in Cyprus Saturday morning. Prime Minister Theresa May said diplomatic efforts at the United Nations to halt the use of chemical weapons had failed.
Just this week, the Russians vetoed a draft resolution that would have established an independent investigation into this latest attack, even making the grotesque and absurd claim that it was staged by Britain.
Analysts say the limited nature of the strikes reflects wariness of triggering a major conflict.
I think the U.S. definitely wanted to focus on the chemical weapons issue and not get tangled into what are the political and military ramifications of Assad's partnership with Russia and Iran.
Germany, Canada, Australia, and Japan expressed support for the airstrikes. European Council President Donald Tusk said the bloc will stand with our allies on the side of justice. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said those who use chemical weapons must be held accountable. China's UN representative urged caution.
To push forward the work of the Security Council in the direction of truly easing a tense situation, avoiding escalating tensions, and promoting the political resolution of the Syria issue.
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned all sides must comply with international law. Moscow had warned that airstrikes on its ally could lead to war. The world is now watching to see if Russia will follow through on its pledge to retaliate.
Russia's UN ambassador expressed Moscow's anger over the coordinated strikes on Syria's chemical weapons storage and research facilities.
We demand the immediate stop to aggression and refrain from the illegal use of force in the future.
On Saturday, a team of inspectors from the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons arrived in Damascus to investigate the site in nearby Douma. Nebenzia criticized the three powers for carrying out the strikes before the team could complete its work and draw conclusions.
This is how you want international affairs to be conducted now? This is hooliganism in international affairs, and not minor hooliganism, as we are talking about major nuclear powers.
The three powers were unapologetic, saying the strikes were justified, legitimate, and proportionate.
Last night, we successfully hit the heart of Syria's chemical weapons enterprise. And because of these actions, we are confident we have crippled Syria's chemical weapons program. We are prepared to sustain this pressure if the Syrian regime is foolish enough to test our will.
Russia also argued that the strikes contradicted international law and the UN Charter. France's ambassador disagreed.
I would remind them that that charter was not designed in order to protect criminals.
Britain's envoy said the action was limited and avoided civilian casualties.
The United Kingdom believes that it was both right and legal to take military action, together with our closest allies, to alleviate further humanitarian suffering by degrading the Syrian regime's chemical weapons capability and deterring the use of chemical weapons.
Russian efforts to get the Council to condemn the strikes in a resolution overwhelmingly failed, earning only 3 of 15 votes in favor.
The United States, the United Kingdom, and France, 3 of the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, conducted a proportional, precision, coordinated strike in response to the Syrian regime's continued use of chemical weapons. This combined military strike was directed against 3 distinct Syrian chemical weapons program targets, and I'm going to show them to you in turn on the monitor behind me, and I think you have access to that information also. The 3 facilities are more appropriately were fundamental components of the regime's chemical weapons warfare infrastructure. Let's go to the first slide, please. The Barza Research and Development Center. Next slide. Pardon me. The Him Shinsar Chemical Weapons Storage Facility. And last, in the next slide, please, the Him Shinsar Chemical Weapons Bunker Facility, which is located about 7 kilometers from the previous Him Shinsar site. This strike aimed to deliver a clear and ambiguous message to the Syrian regime that their use of chemical weapons against innocent civilians is inexcusable and to deter any future use of chemical weapons.
We close our borders, we trap them in Syria.
Outside the White House Saturday, demonstrators protested U.S., British, and French military strikes against Syrian chemical weapons facilities.
I think that this attack on Syria is just part of a long legacy of U.S. imperialism around the world and believing that we can dictate and control what happens around the world. And it inevitably always increases conflict, increases destruction, increases death and suffering.
Others say that the protection of civilians should be the priority.
So as far as the strikes and destroying the chemical weapons facilities, I think that's a positive thing if that's harming Syrian civilians. But my number one concern with those strikes is that any Syrian civilians on the ground were harmed or killed. I hope if that happened, that's terrible, and I think that's bad.
And he's not the only D.C. resident who feels conflicted about the strikes.
I have very mixed emotions about it. I think it's necessary. I'm glad that we're trying to do something to protect the people who live in Syria. But I am concerned because, bombing things is not necessarily my first choice of diplomacy.
While others here in Washington believe that military action was necessary against Syrian President Assad.
Somebody has to stand up to try to protect the people of Syria because we have too many children that were killed in this gas attack, and I think it's the right thing.
U.S. Defense Secretary Mattis said that the strikes would be a one-time shot if President Assad does not use chemical weapons again. Many are hopeful this is the case.
Well, it was quite a Friday night surprise of a great magnitude. My hope now is that things don't escalate to the point where cooler heads can't prevail in this.
Trump accused Russia and Iran, 2 of Syria's main allies, of supporting murderous dictators and urged Moscow to change course. Russia's ambassador to the U.S. condemned the strikes and warned of consequences.
We selected these targets carefully to minimize the risk to innocent civilians. We're still conducting a more detailed damage assessment, but initial indications are that we accomplished our military objectives without material interference from Syria. I'd use 3 words to describe this operation: precise, overwhelming, and effective. Let's go back to the first Barza slide, please. Against the first target, the Barza Research and Development Center, which is located in the greater Damascus area, we employed 76 missiles. 57 of these were Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles, and 19 were Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missiles, or JASSMs. As you can see for yourself from the graphics, initial assessments are that this target was destroyed. This is going to set the Syrian chemical weapons program back for years. You'll also note that we've successfully destroyed 3 buildings in metropolitan Damascus, one of the most heavily defended aerospace areas in the world. Next slide, please. Against the second target, the Him Shinsar Chemical Weapons Storage Facility, which is located in Syria just west of Homs, 22 weapons were employed. 9 U.S. TLAMs, 8 Storm Shadow missiles, 3 naval cruise missiles, and 2 Scalp land attack cruise missiles. So this target was attacked by all coalition forces. Our Tomahawks, the British Storm Shadow, and then the French missiles went against it as well. Against the third target, next slide, the Hem-Shinsar chemical weapons bunker facility, we deployed 7 Scout missiles. Again, the initial assessment is that this bunker facility was successfully hit. I'd now just like to talk a bit about the specific platforms that were part of this strike, and let's go back to the first slide, please. The missiles that I've just described were delivered from British, French, and U.S. air and naval platforms in the Red Sea, the Northern Arabian Gulf, and the Eastern Mediterranean. All weapons hit their targets at very close to the designated time on target of about 4 a.m. in Syria, which of course is 9 o'clock here on the East Coast. I'm going to give you a little more details now about the platforms. First, in the Red Sea, the Ticonderoga class cruiser Monterey fired 30 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles, and the Arleigh Burke class destroyer Laboon fired 7 Tomahawks. In the North Arabian Gulf, the Burke class destroyer Higgins fired 23 Tomahawks. In the Eastern Mediterranean, the French frigate Languedoc fired 3 missiles of their naval version of the Scat missile. Also in the Mediterranean, the Virginia-class submarine John Warner fired 6 Tomahawk missiles. In the air, 2 B-1 Lancer bombers fired 19 joint air-to-surface standoff missiles. In addition, our British allies flew a combination of Tornadoes and Typhoons and launched 8 Storm Shadow missiles. Our French allies flew a combination of Rafales and Mirages and launched 9 Scout missiles.